My name is Pradeep Mehta. I head the CUTS International, which is a public interest research and advocacy group based in India, but we have offices in London, Lusaka, Nairobi, and Hanoi as well. And most of our work is around international trade and regulatory issues. The Doha round is trying to come to grips with the endemic problem of international trade, which is farm subsidies in the West. And therefore, there is this struggle to how far the West can go and how far the South can get out of the round. Because farm issues have been at the heart of the WTO ever since the Uruguay round was launched. And agriculture has always been either a deal maker or a deal breaker. It's a very contentious issue because you are trying to reform the agriculture system in Europe and America, and Japan, Korea, Norway, etc. These are the kind of countries who are interested in keeping high tariffs, give high subsidies to their farmers to be able to produce at a low cost and sell around the world, which has in turn had the sort of deleterious consequence of the developing world farms not being able to produce and be able to compete effectively in the global market, including their own domestic markets. Development was the key to the preamble of the WTO, which reads as raising living standards everywhere in the world, creating jobs, and so on and so forth. Fine, any preamble or objectives of a law are usually hortatory principles, but then that's the base of the whole rubric. And so far, what had happened was, after the arrival of the WTO, the experience which the developing world had of the WTO agreements being totally a new set of agreements, by the year 2000 they realized that they're not gaining what they should have gained, and in fact continental sub-Saharan Africa has actually lost in its share of international trade. Some of the developing countries, particularly advanced developing countries like Brazil, India, have gained, yet the promise of development which was made at Doha, it was called the Doha Development Agenda, has not been kept. And that relates to the issue of agriculture as one of the main issues. There are, of course, a score of other issues. That's not the only issue. One can sort of use the cliche of North versus South here. The ministerial meeting at Cancun collapsed. And as I often say, it did not fail. It was a turning point in this whole international economic relations, where a new Quad was born. The old Quad disappeared. So you had US, India, and Brazil battling it out, which was never the situation earlier. Earlier, during the GATT days, it was the old Quad which decided, and the rest of the world went along. The old Quad meaning Europe, US, Canada, and Japan. Any such initiative which comes from what I call a track 3 approach, not a track 2 approach, is always essential to inform the public at large as to what is happening or what is not happening and what should happen. And there I feel that the Commission has a great role to play. One is the discussion that will take place within the Commission itself. And the second and more important thing is how it is able to reach out to a larger public, including policymakers. The outcomes of the Commission would be to remind the world that there is a democratic deficit, there is a lack of economic equity in the world that needs to be restored, that needs to be respected. And there are ways to do it, other than just whining and and griping, is to show the world that if southern economies can gain, it is the western economies who will also gain. Because you will have, the northern economies will have a bigger market. These are very elementary things which people tend to forget. There are vested interests all over. Let's look at, say, the US main opposition to reforming its own agriculture. Comes not from farmers, it comes from the big farm companies, the big agro companies, which is the main beneficiaries of the subsidy system. In Europe, it's another little different story, little different, it's not much different. How do you reform the sort of system which can bring about a level playing field for all countries to be able to compete effectively? The fact is that the WTO is all about competitiveness. I mean, it's no longer about aid. I mean, it's not aid that they're talking about. It's about trade. And in order for the poor countries to be able to trade well, they need to have a level playing field. That's what the whole WTO is about. It's not only that. You look at the Millennium Development Goals. And there's this whole consciousness of the international community that the trade system has to be reformed. If you want to reduce poverty, there is a direct impact.